The London protests were quite peaceful, although some think this is really just about xenophobia. We need to look a little bit deeper and find out really what is going on, and if later on things can turn nasty. So recently in the United Kingdom, country that I've come from, so as I've told you, I do hold a British passport. I was born in Ghana, so I'm Ghanaian, but I hold a British passport, and grew up, spent most of my life in the United Kingdom as well. So you could say I'm kind of Ghanaian and British. But recently in London, in the UK, massive protests, about 150,000 people showed up. Some are saying it was much more than 150,000. Some are saying million, and some are exaggerating the figures. However, it was a lot of people that showed up for these protests. And the key figures leading the way, Tommy Robinson, and we had appearing via video link Elon Musk to speak to this audience in central London. Now, those that were attending these protests, they were attending because they're disturbed about the state of the country, United Kingdom. All over the country in the UK, if you look over the past 20, 30 years, you'll see a changing demographic in particular areas. So if you go to certain parts of London, it has been populated more with certain ethnicities. You go to certain parts of the country in the north, certain ethnicities have taken over whole regions of the United Kingdom. Now, is it the fault of the people who've been brought in? Definitely not. Is it the fault of the government that brought the people in or allowed the people to get in? Yes and no. Now let me explain. So the reason why so many people have ended up moving from their countries to the UK is because starting from after the Second World War, the United Kingdom was slightly underpopulated. Obviously due to the fact that so many people had passed on because of the war. And so the UK opened up its borders to different ones from what it's called the Commonwealth. So you had a lot of people who came from the West Indies, you had people that came from places like India and so on and so forth, and they all came to the center point of the former British Empire to help rebuild after the Second World War. And things progressed, different infrastructures were built or rebuilt, and things were not bad. Things were a little bit tense, and you did have different groups rise up, like the National Front and the British National Party, and you had the famous speech by Enoch Powell, Rivers of Blood, I believe it was, that was put forward. But we've got to understand that after a little while, things began to kind of simmer down, and that population kind of, how can I put it, melted into each other. And so there was some kind of peace. However, there were certain migrants that came into the country and they didn't really integrate into the British society. Instead of integrating, they kind of kept to themselves and formed what we could call a semblance of their own countries inside pockets of the United Kingdom. So they set up some of these places as if they were trying to set up Sharia countries. And I'm talking about Muslim mainly peoples that moved into the UK.
Whitechapel in East London. A hardline vigilante group is trying to impose Sharia law on unsuspecting members of the public.
It's a Muslim area, okay? Alcohol, bad. This is a Muslim area.
It's not just drinkers being targeted.
Yeah, you're gay, mate. Get out of here, mate. Get out of here, you fag.
And women wearing skirts above the knee are also being harassed.
To not dress like that in Muslim area.
Only a handful of men are involved in the self-styled patrols. 5 have been arrested on suspicion of harassment.
They tried to set up Sharia law in certain places and were putting up stickers and doing all kinds of stuff to set up what they believe would be a system that was compatible with them, and not considering the fact that they had moved into the UK, some other people's country, without considering their laws and customs and so on and so forth. Now, why did all of this begin to escalate? Well, it began to escalate because, number one, in the UK, we have to understand the population of the United Kingdom is aging and has been aging. And when I say aging, I'm not talking about all of the UK. I'm speaking specifically about the Caucasian inhabitants of the country. These, if you do your search, you will find that population demographics will tell you that their birth rate has been on the decline. They are not replenishing themselves. And so if we look along the generations, coming all the way back from the Second World War, that population has been on a decline. If you understand anything about money and economics, and we have to look at the money to understand what is going on. It's not simple enough for you to just look at infrastructure and immigration to understand why things have spiraled out of control. So when we look at the money, what we realize is that this system that is set up with benefits and so on and so forth, and a healthcare system that's supposedly free. It's not free because you're paying for it through your taxation, which the government in the UK do not trust its inhabitants. And so your tax and your national insurance is deducted from your salary before it even hits your bank account. And so the infrastructure in the UK is dependent on people of a certain age group working, because when people are aging more than you have people who are actually working to be taxed and also put that money into the system, then you are going to eventually bankrupt that system. And as we speak, as of now, that system, in my personal belief, is bankrupt. And because it's bankrupt, the only solution right now is to abandon that system and enter into a different one. And so let's look a little bit deeper at really what is going on right now. Now, it's funny that when these people came out to protest, they put on a live stream Elon Musk, someone who's been speaking about AI and robotics taking over the world and causing people to lose jobs. And so they're going to need to bring out something called UBI, Universal Basic Income.
There will come a point where no job is needed. You can have a job if you want to have a job for sort of personal satisfaction, but the AI will be able to do everything. So I don't know if that makes people comfortable or uncomfortable. You know, that's why I say if you wish for a magic genie, that gives you any wishes you want, and there's no limit. You don't have those three wish limit nonsense. You just have as many wishes as you want. It's both good and bad. One of the challenges in the future will be, how do we find meaning in life?
Universal Basic Income, or UBI, a fixed sum, regardless of all other income, paid to everyone to help cover basic costs such as food and housing. The underlying idea has been around since sometime in the 16th century, but for the most part, it's remained a fringe concept without much mainstream interest. However, with the rise of automation in recent years, UBI has garnered a lot more attention and support, with an increasing number of pilot programs being run around the world. This attention increased even more during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Instead of Elon being frank and honest about actually what is taking place, he comes on and actually bolsters the opinion of someone who comes from a racist background that is touting Christianity and other things. I don't know how you can be a Christian and a racist, even though some of the stuff that Tommy Robinson said is true. It's almost like a smokescreen. It's like the calm before the storm, because he now has an audience. And if we look into the history of this particular person, it doesn't really bode well for people of different ethnicities in the UK if he were to come into great power in that country. So it's really kind of au contraire that Elon Musk would get behind this particular person and put the blame of the economic crisis that is taking place in the UK on migration. Because the truth of the matter is, this is not the reason. The reason is that the governments, the previous governments, realized what was going on with the whole status of the demographics in the UK. They realized their population was aging and flooded the country with migrants in order to support the benefit system and systems of government by bringing these people in to work minimum wage jobs so that they could tax them and thereby support the system. So we were seeing an influx of people coming out of places in Europe, Romania, Poland, until the British public got tired and they got fed up. It wasn't necessarily Muslim people at that point. It was a lot of Polish people and people from Eastern Europe coming into the UK, and guess what they were doing? They were taking construction jobs that a lot of Caucasian people like to do, because some of those jobs, they were getting paid under the table. These people came in, ruined everything, and so when there was a protest for Brexit, they believed that Brexit would cause these people to leave. But guess what? Brexit happened, and a lot of these people managed to get papers to stay in the country and still siphoned capital from the indigenous people of the land, and the money was going now into first and now second generation Eastern Europeans and other migrants. So what's happened? Let's really get into this. So the truth of the matter is, those people came in for this reason. But Elon Musk, as I said, is not being honest, because he knows AI and robotics is taking over a whole bunch of people's jobs. And so those people are not needed anymore in a lot of jobs. And because they're not needed anymore, and as the years go on, AI and robotics will take over more and more jobs, the unrest is going to get worse. And the only way to keep a population distracted is to blame it on somebody. And so it will be, unfortunately, a rise of xenophobia in places like the UK and the US and other countries in Europe, because they need to blame someone. In France has been on fire. Why? Because of some of the same problems. Unemployment is at great heights. And who do we blame for the unemployment? Who do we blame for prices going up? Who do we blame for an infrastructure that is falling apart? Why? Because money has not been put into the system to be able to maintain and even expand or even change facilities such as hospitals and other facilities so that it could take care of the populace. So the only people you turn around and blame in such a situation is migrants, when the truth of the matter is, for instance, France just lost more of its colonies on the continent of Africa, where they were actually siphoning a lot of the capital out of those countries, and those countries protested, got fed up, kicked them out, and now France is facing the brunt of the loss of income. France, which was a parasite on their economies, and they got tired of the parasite, and now the parasite is dying. Oops. So let me explain. It's not just the technology is taking jobs. We also have something called the law of cycles. In fact, in the Bible, I know some of you don't like when I quote from the Bible, but the Bible in the book of Ecclesiastes says it says nothing is new under the sun. It says there's a time for everything under the sun. And so we've got to understand that time is not linear as people understand. It is actually cyclical. And every 100 years or so, there is a major war. And in certain countries, there are civil wars. And we also have what's called currency cycles for fiat currencies. Fiat is not real money. Real money is gold and silver. And if you've noticed of late, you will see that the price of gold has gone through the roof. And the reason for that is because the fiat currencies that were formerly trusted, they are crashing, and they have to crash because the cycle of their use is finished. So the dollar is toast. It will probably still exist, but it will change form, probably becoming more digital. Same with the pound and a lot of these currencies. Why is this happening? It's because of the law of cycles. And in this law of cycles, we also have empires that have to end. So when you look at different empires in the past, like Rome, Assyria, Egypt, Babylon, and so on and so forth, they all rose, reached a zenith where they were at the top, and then they began their decline. And as they declined, what happened? You had the emergence of other powers that came to the fore and began to rise. And when that starts to happen, conflict starts in the world, because the former hegemony or former power sees this new kid on the block and says, I can't allow this, but it's normally too late, because that new kid on the block does not have the weaknesses that the older one or the older system has. And so as it emerges, it takes over power on the world stage, which brings me to my third point. We have now emerging in the world multipolar powers. We have Brazil, we have India, China, Russia, South Africa rising as new powers. And so power will no longer be centralized in Europe and in America. We are going to see different regions of the world rising in power, and we're going to see allegiances shift and resources shift. And so in the interim, whilst everything is multipolar, we're going to see people and countries fighting one another, and we're also going to see the rise of xenophobia, because this is what happens every 100 years. So for those of you that are following Tommy Robinson, and for those of you that are saying that it's all about migration, why England and America and France and all these countries are going through their economic decline, you really have to go a lot deeper than you have done to understand the real issues, because someone has pulled the wool over your eyes when the truth is really staring you in the face. The West is now in decline, and that is why many of you of the diaspora need to leave these places, because, as I keep saying, the ship is sinking and somebody needs to wake up. You've been watching another edition of the Intelligence Report. My name's Dr. Joseph Opari. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.